Pastor Vito here with our weekly reflection on the steps. So far we've covered step 1, where we talked about the idea of surrender and what does it mean to actually give up in order to win. We've also looked at the idea of hope. What does it mean to have hope in something greater than us or beyond us, as in the God that we know through Jesus? Now today we'll be looking at step 3. So I'll read it, and step 3 we're going to talk about what does it mean to trust. So we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. The scripture in Matthew 11:28 says this: "Then Jesus said, 'Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest.'" So from our devotional on step 3, I'm going to read a couple of sentences and then I'll offer a brief reflection. When our burdens become heavy and we see that our way of life is leading towards death, we may finally become willing to let someone else do the driving. We probably worked hard at trying to get our lives on the right track, but still feel like we always end up on a dead-end street. Proverbs tells us that there is a path before each person that seems right, but its end is death. Proverbs 14:12. When we begin our addictive behaviors, we probably are seeking a way to find pleasure or to overcome the pain of living. The way seemed right at first, but it became clear that we were on the wrong track. But then we were unable to turn around on our own. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." The third step is really about trust. We learn to give up control in step 1. We learn to believe that there is a possibility we can get better, and we have hope in step 2 and the process of recovery and in God. Step 3, we actually have to begin to trust God. And as Jesus says, take upon his yoke, because our way doesn't work. Self-will does not work for the addict. The addict has to learn how to trust the God that created us and made us and calls us into relationship to him in Jesus. So this idea of trusting in the third step is really a difficult thing for addicts, because a lot of us have a past where we do not trust people. We may have had other relationships, authority figures, parents, bosses, neighbors, uncles take advantage of us. So this idea of trust, even with God, is a really hard gap for the addict to step across. So I just want to offer a word of encouragement this morning that we learned that in step 1, we have to give up. We have to surrender. In step 2, we have to learn that we can hope in a God that will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And we begin to see the acts of what God does in our daily life in step 2. Those acts that we see, that hope begins to build this idea of trust. But we actually have to make that decision that the third step talks about. We have to take that step of faith. We have to actually entrust ourselves to God and allow him to care for our wills and our lives. It is very hard, especially when we have a painful past. But I encourage you, just try it. Make the decision to trust God, who wants to care for you and love you. And we will next week, we will talk about step 4. What does it mean to go with God on the journey into our past to do a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves? So I want you to look at these 3 ideas. Step 1, we want to surrender. We want to give up. Step 2, we want to begin to have hope, what God can do for us, what we can't do for ourselves. And step 3, we want to learn to actually trust him. And we want to learn how to grow in our trust with God, allowing him to guide our lives. So blessings, Epiphany Church. I hope that these reflections are helpful for you. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. The step process is really transformative and life-changing as we learn to trust Jesus even with our addictions.